Hi everyone, welcome to session 12 of Living is Dying. I'm Zhang Mo, one of the Living is Dying team. Wonderful that you've taken the time to join us. Thank you so much. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of country throughout Australia or wherever you're practicing from. We recognise their connection to land, waters and culture and pay our respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. So we're now on the chapter Simple Practices to Prepare for Death. And I'm just going to share my spotlight with Tara. So today we're joined by Tara Francis, and I will share her bio. And then we're going to use some of the book, get Tara to share some words, go back to the book. So we'll be coming and going a little bit. Tara has practiced Vipassana and Metta, loving kindness meditation, for 40 years in Burma, Nepal and Australia, with Sayadaw U Pandita, the senior disciple of Mahasi Sayadaw, and other senior teachers in the Mahasi Burmese tradition. She is a co-founder and was a major sponsor in the establishment of the Blue Mountains Insight Meditation Center. Tara has been a teacher of meditation and has a deep respect and interest in the variety of Buddhist traditions. She's received teachings from Dzongsa Khyentse Rinpoche, the Dalai Lama and many others. Tara has degrees in social work and health science and has worked in the fields of mental health, environmental health, and as a volunteer over a number of years in palliative care. And also we were lucky enough in our 3-year retreat, Tara was actually invited by Rinpoche to come and encourage us wild retreatants to sit Vipassana for a week between each of the major sections of our retreat. So we had the pleasure of working with her there. So I'm now going to read from Rinpoche's text, and then we'll come back and we'll speak with Tara. Just bear with me, I have a tech issue. Here we go. Fantastic. Simple practices to prepare for death. Woody Allen is often quoted as having said, "I'm not afraid of dying, I just don't want to be there when it happens." Unfortunately for Woody Allen, he is likely to be far more there and aware at the moment of death than he was at any other time in his life. So what would I say to someone like Woody Allen about how to prepare for death? If he were open to it, I would mention Bodhicitta's big vision of love, compassion, and the wish to enlighten all sentient beings. I would also tell him that everything we see, hear, touch and so on, including birth and death, is a projection created by our own minds. I would then take him step by step through a mindfulness practice so that he could get used to the idea that everything is an illusion projected by mind. So Tara, I'm aware that you had a near-death experience, and I'm wondering if you could share a bit about that with us, and that it also, well, from speaking with you, it gave the opportunity for you to really look at how you needed to adjust your practice. So over to you.
Okay, thanks Zhang Mo, thanks Annie Zhang Mo, and thanks everybody for being here to listen to me. It's a great privilege to be invited to to talk with you tonight. So yeah, thank you very much for having me, Annie Zangmo, and the group that are organising this, and also thank you for everybody for being here. So yeah, I guess, my bio just gives you a little bit of an idea that, I've been practicing, particularly in the Burmese tradition of Vipassana practice, or Vipassana, as if you're pronouncing it in the Sanskrit, and that's been my, I guess, my predominantly primary practice, although I have been very involved in other traditions as well, and have deep respect, as my bio mentions. And when I was overseas, this sort of, my illness happened, or my episode in hospital happened about 9 years ago now, and just before that had happened, I was overseas and was doing intensive practice, and also had spent some time with Rinpoche in some quite long and intensive teachings and empowerment. And so, I guess, I was probably in one of the better spaces that I could be in terms of being able to be present with whatever was happening and just be really uplifted by all of that experience. And then I came back home to Australia, and soon after that, I was at a family gathering in a restaurant in Melbourne, and it was my sister-in-law's 50th birthday, and it was about 40 people from the family and friends were attending that. And I was feeling great, I was feeling physically and mentally pretty good. And so I entered the restaurant a bit later because I felt like I didn't want to be sort of in this lots of crowds and lots of talking, sort of after having been in retreat for quite a bit of time. So I turned up, and just about a few minutes after I arrived, I started to feel a bit dizzy, and I just said to someone, "Oh, I feel a bit dizzy." And the next minute, without any awareness of what had happened, I hit the deck, I hit the floor, fell, and most of everybody thought I just fainted. But apparently I hadn't fainted. And my sister-in-law, who was there with some of her friends who she'd invited, were emergency nurses, and they realised that my heart had stopped and I'd stopped breathing on the floor of this restaurant. I was well and truly sort of unaware of anything by this point. And so they resuscitated me, fortunately, because if, they hadn't been there, I may not have survived. And still it was touch and go. So I was taken to hospital. I had a moment of awaking as I was put into the ambulance. And after that, it was 3 days later that I actually gained some level of consciousness. So it was quite a, I guess, a shocking experience for the people who were around me to witness that, it's sort of because it was so unexpected. And it was interesting to read in Rinpoche's books about, I don't know if it sort of was in that section in the text in the hardcover book. It mentions about slow death. Well, often having worked in palliative care, we do see people who have got a life-threatening illness or, an end of life, and they get to go through a period of time where, the health is deteriorating more and more until that point of death. But for me, it was actually immediate and sudden. I had no idea that I was even going to pass out, let alone lose, my heartbeat and breathing and actually die. And so I was in hospital for 3 weeks, having a couple of other cardiac arrests. So it was pretty touch and go that I survived, but I did survive. And I have to say, just as a sort of aside, I guess, I know friends, many Buddhist friends, my Dharma family, I guess, were very supportive of me at that time. Rinpoche had tried to ring me. I had, Theravada monks coming to visit me in hospital, both when I was still unconscious or in a coma, and then when I became more conscious. And it took me some time to become more able to do anything much for myself. I was in bed, I couldn't move at all. So I felt, in a way, when I look back at it, or even soon after I'd left hospital, I felt like I'd actually died and been reborn in the same body, because I'd felt so helpless. I was I wasn't able to move my arms or feed myself. I was like a baby. I was having to wear nappies. There was no control of any bodily functions. But I guess from that practice time, and for me, that was such a reminder of how important it is to be prepared for death, as our teachers tell us, is that, there was this sort of just this interest in being in this body that was so helpless, and using those opportunities to watch that experience. Not that I was perfectly calm every moment, but mostly I actually found it a really interesting and quite profound experience to have gone through that, and to have sort of observed the body in that way, so helpless, and then having to relearn how to walk, how to be able to get strength enough to feed myself, to be able to regain bodily functions, going through that time. So it was quite a unique experience. I guess there's other people who go through that, but it's not that common. And for me, I'd never come across anybody who'd been through something similar. So it was a great learning for me at that time in hospital to sort of observe and have the opportunity to practice while I was in that sort of state, and in the best way I could, because mentally, I wasn't very conscious at times, and other times I was becoming quite clear in the mind, but the body was still very weak. And it took quite some time, quite some months, for me to recover. And just to let you know what actually happened, and was that a main vein, it had ruptured spontaneously, and I'd bled out into the abdomen. And so then there was not enough blood in the body for the heart to continue pumping. So, I was very lucky to survive. But what also happened from that experience was that blood vessel never really has recovered fully. And so the circulation, because it's down low in the abdomen, it was the main vein that was in the abdomen, that circulation in that whole side below there, and predominantly the leg, is not very good now. The circulation is compromised. And so it made me have to think about the way that I could physically hold my body when I was in meditation, when I was, in a sitting practice of meditation. And I guess I've had some other, aches and pains before that event, where my knees, as I'm getting older, and my knees weren't as quite as fit as they had been, having used to sit for long retreats and for long periods of time without moving, and being very able to sit very still for long periods of time without virtually any pain, which is also not always so common. But for some reason, that was my body, that was my conditions. So, but after that experience, all of a sudden I've got this very different body, and that's, it has recovered to some degree, but it's not as able as it was. And so it made me reflect both on myself and my own practice, and also my role as a teacher, to instruct people around working with the body, how to engage with, what body you're with, what conditions are with the body, whether you have some disability, whether it's permanent or temporary, whether there's some injury, whether there's illness, or whether it's, like as in hospital. And I have taught some meditation to people at end stage of life, whether people who are, at that final stage, and looking at wanting to have some way of practicing to bring some, presence to that whole experience, as well as bringing some calmness to the mind to be able to deal with those difficulties, the challenges of having physical pain, or the challenges of dying, and the, the fear perhaps, or whatever emotions that might come with that at different times. So it made me reflect quite a lot on that, and also change my relationship to death, I have to say, to some degree. And I mean, I guess I'll be tested fully when the next time comes around, but it made me have a different relationship to life and death, perhaps, in a way that I've, think about death a bit differently now. And it, I do have no I don't have any memory of that time, as people have asked me, oh, did you see light, or did you see anything, or what was your experience of that time when you were, when you died or when you weren't conscious? And I had to say to people, there was nothing in, that was my experience in the sensory realm. There was no sense experiences at all. But I have to say, and this I think has affected my relationship to death to some degree, is that I felt when I'd become more conscious and alert, I just had this strong feeling with no sensory experience to support that feeling, was that it was just a really lovely time. There was something really lovely about that experience, but I can't say why that I felt that way. So that's also affected, I guess, how I feel about death to some degree. But coming back to the idea of practice, in a formal practice, then how to work with, now this body that had changed and wasn't able to sit cross-legged for sort of long periods of time. There was different ways that I had to think about working with the body to enable, to keep the body still for sort of periods of time, or to bring some level of comfort. I mean, it's not that you need to not experience any pain, or you want to sort of escape pain. Certainly that's not the purpose of a vipassana or mindfulness practice. But at the same time, you don't want to be putting your body in a position where you're forcing it to sit through unbearable or great discomfort if there's a chronic condition that's not going to get better by sitting for long periods of time necessarily, although that possibly could happen for some people. So anyway, that was, there's this change in my sitting practice, and a change in my relationship to my body, I guess you could say, in terms of how I work with the body, and also, I guess, in inviting other people who I may teach to look at the body and respect the body and be gentle and spacious with the body, to enable the mind and body to be in harmony to as much degree as possible, to enable to develop a good relationship to whatever arises in the mind and the body, whatever those sort of experiences might be. So I guess I can leave it there for the moment, and I think Annie Zangbo is going to read a little more now of Rinpoche's book to hopefully fit in with a bit what I will talk about, and we'll do some practice after she's read that bit. So back to you, Annie Zangbo.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate you sharing that. Trouble with my cursor here.
I can't see you, I can only see me.
That's all right, we're screen sharing now. I'm just having trouble lining things up. Here we go. Mindfulness practice. Woody, look at your coffee. Just look at it. If as you look at your coffee, you find yourself thinking about your car, just bring your mind back to your coffee. Try doing this a few times. If you wish, you can go a step further. Instead of focusing on your coffee, look at the thought that is passing through your mind at this very moment. Just stare at that thought. Merely observe it. Don't allow the thought to become entangled in your next thought. Don't analyze the thought. Don't reject it. Don't adopt it, and don't take it seriously. A thought doesn't have to be interesting for it to be worth staring at. Even if the thought is the most mundane, banal, and boring thought that ever popped into your mind, just stare at it, without trying to adjust or improve it. That is what I would say to Woody Allen, and I'd say it again and again. By putting my advice into practice, Woody, you would realize just how powerful mind really is. You will also see for yourself that it is mind that continuously creates projections, and mind that instantly forgets what it has just done. You will see how mind starts believing that everything it perceives outside of itself is real and there. Then it forgets that it created those projections itself. Once mind is convinced that everything is outside and separate, it starts learning how to alienate itself from its own projections, convinced that it is entirely separate from what it sees. Mind projects all kinds of ideas and concepts that it then goes in search of. So it is mind that projects the concept of God, and mind that then chases around in circles trying to find that God. Mind is such a masochist. It's as if it wants to feel alienated from God just to have something to pray to. Once you realize that everything you see is projected by your own mind, you are well on the way to understanding that everything necessarily includes birth, death, living and dying. This information and practice will help loosen your grip on your ideas about what living really is. You will begin to realize that life and living are simply part of yet another illusion. Having said all that, Woody, I strongly recommend that you now go to your favourite jazz club and listen to the music you love. Don't waste time. Spend all your money doing everything you have always wanted to do, and try to make others happy too, because making others happy will make you happy. This is what I would say to Woody Allen, or to any of us. So back to Tara to share a practice with us.
Okay. Before we do practice, I'd just like to just talk about, I guess, continue on from what I was saying around that sort of sense of spaciousness and kindness in practice, both for the physical, the physical experience, the body and the physical challenges that we might experience in the body, as well as the mental states. And when it comes down to it, I mean, whatever happens in the body, it's our reactivity to those experiences that's the thing that causes us suffering. So it's a matter of developing a different relationship, or not a non-identifying relationship to those experiences. And that takes practice. It's not something we can just wish that can happen or just start doing. It's something that for most of us, we need to work with the mind or train the mind, or whatever words you might use, sort of, or concepts you use to describe that way of working, to look at bringing more clarity and purity in the actual quality of awareness, so there's not this attachment or this rejection of anything that arises. And with difficult experiences, of course, with painful experiences, that's much more difficult, or both painful physically and mentally. So, just this continuous training of the mind is something that I've aspired to continue with and work to continue to purify my mind, and to bring a more wisdom and understanding, which is the Vipassana or mindfulness practices, is what that's really about. The other form of practice, which I have also been doing for some years, and as was mentioned in my bio, is a loving kindness practice and a compassion practice. And Rinpoche mentions that about bringing happiness to other people, because if we're happy and we can come from that point of being happy with a pure mind, then of course we're going to affect our relationship with other people. So I usually sort of start when I'm teaching on a retreat, which I don't do a lot of, but it's something that I really found has been of great benefit to me personally in my own relationship to my own mind and my practice, but also I've found from feedback, at least some people have found just remembering to bring that quality of spacious, open-hearted kindness to whatever experiences arise in the body and the mind. And so I often start my practice. I mean, I have gone on long retreats just to do purely a loving kindness or compassion practice, but I usually bring that into my other vipassana or mindfulness practice as well. So what I've been asked to do and what I'd like to do now is to just do a couple of short practices. So I'd just like you to start by just getting comfortable in your normal, whatever your normal formal sitting practice is, whether it's sitting cross-legged on the floor or sitting in a chair. Just mostly people talk about with the spine upright because it helps to bring, more alertness to the mind. I mean, there's different reasons for giving instructions like that. It's not just like, oh, that's because it looks good, or I think I'm a good yogi if I'm sitting upright. But it's because it actually brings stability and alertness in the mind when the body's comfortable, not too stiff, but upright. So, that's, I guess, how I aspired to sit when I was in formal sitting practice. So we'll start by just sitting in whatever way is comfortable, or whether you sit in a chair, whether you sort of lean with cushions in the back, just, and whether you keep your eyes closed or open. In my tradition, in the Burmese tradition, usually people have their eyes closed. I know when some of the Mahayana teachers teach, they have their eyes open. And so whichever is comfortable for you is fine. So whatever you're used to, just with the eyes just maybe slightly open, with the eyes closed, just, find yourself sitting comfortably and just bring a general awareness to the whole body. Just bringing that spaciousness, that sort of sense of observing the whole body with space, just without trying to zero in on anything, concentrating on anything particular. I mean, just seeing if the mind might sort of get drawn to particular things, but just allow the mind just to be quite broad and wide in its observation of the body and the mind sitting. And just to bring that open-heartedness. So, that doing something like that will help bring a bit more spaciousness to the mind. So to bring some sense of open-heartedness, what I like to do and what I offer today and what I offer to some of my other students on retreat is to start just for a minute or two doing a loving kindness or a compassion practice, whichever you prefer. I mean, and it depends on the words and the concepts and the meaning that resonate with you, that bring that quality of mind, because it's not the words that are so critical, well, not so critical at all. It's the feeling that the words are generating. So just to bring a quality of open-heartedness to this sitting practice and this sitting pose, just usually there's a repetition of a phrase or a word. It might just be a single word, or it might be a short phrase, but just something quite simple. And if it's about compassion, it may all beings be free from suffering. But usually we start, in the Theravada tradition, we start with ourselves. So we can actually generate that quality first, so then we can project it or radiate it out, if you like, it's a better word, radiate it and share that. So just in your sitting posture, whether you've got your eyes open or closed, just as comfortably as you can, with that open, spacious quality, and just bringing that a word or a phrase like free from suffering. May I be free from suffering, if you want to, just, or may I be at ease. You can use that word of ease instead. So if there's suffering, just to bring that ease in the mind, just choose one word or phrase that just, hits the spot for this moment. It doesn't have to be the only thing you'd ever use, but just repeating that phrase just in a very, or that word in a very sort of gentle, spacious sort of way, not trying to, pound the mind with too many words, but not also let it too loose by leaving too much space between each of those words or phrases. So be at ease, and just give it to yourself for a moment, because what we're trying to do here is generate that open-heartedness to develop that ability then to engage with that quality of open-heartedness to our experience when we come to the mindfulness practice. So we'll just, may I be at ease. I'll just use that. And then just, because we don't have a lot of time, just then offer that to, whether you want to do it to all living beings, just to offer that so they be free from suffering, maybe that may they be all become enlightened, may they all develop that sense of purity of mind, and so may all beings be at ease or free from suffering, just repeating that. And now just drop the phrase now, because we're just doing this very briefly. And just, but keeping the eyes either semi-closed or closed, whichever, or if you're fully open, that's fine. But just don't let the mind just, now we've finished, take off. Just holding that spaciousness with the body and the mind, that just being observant to, you know, the experience in the mind at the moment. How does the mind feel? What's the mind state there? Is there some sense of ease or calmness in the mind? Or is this sort of some tension? You know, whatever is there is fine. It's not sort of trying to force any quality into the mind, but just be aware of what's there. And now we'll just make this shift in the same posture from that loving kindness or compassion practice, which is a shamatha practice, and into the mindfulness by what we, you know, by using whatever, if you normally do some mindfulness practice, maybe most people would focus on the breath. So just as you've got that open, spacious quality to the mind, bring your attention to that object that you usually use for your mindfulness practice, if you do have one, and just bring the concentration, that quality of concentration onto that place, but just in a spacious, open way. Don't force the mind too quickly and too intensely and too closely to that object, but just gently start to bring awareness to the object, and then moving the mind closer and closer to the object. So you're sitting there comfortably and observing that experience. Because with the mindfulness, we're trying to actually see what's actually the quality of that experience that we call breath, whether we call it rising and falling, whether we just observe it, but just looking at that elemental quality of that object. And if you don't use the breath, you can just use the contact. If you've got your arms on your hands on your lap or somewhere, just that contact point, and just be observant of that pressure and just be aware of that. So just bringing that quality of mindfulness. So just not just focusing the mind and holding it still and letting the mind sort of rabbit off on, you know, on something else, but just, you know, always bringing it back if it's wandered off. But at the same time, you know, notice what it's doing when it's wandered off. So is it thinking about something else? And then just be aware that there's thinking, and then just gently bring that back to the other main object that you're observing, and be aware of the quality of that experience in the breath. Is it tight or is it relaxed? Is it long? Is it short? How does it change as you're watching it? And the same with the contact point. Is it soft? Is it hard? Is it warm? Is it cool? Just be aware of it, and just being that spacious, accepting openness to observing that. And then just opening the eyes, sort of reconnecting with the external environment and just your general sense of where you are. And now I'd just like you to, and this is what I also explain and encourage people to do, and I'd like you to offer this to you too. As I was unable to sit in my normal posture, and I still can't sit fully cross-legged now, I would invite you to find another posture now, imagining that you're feeling unwell. Maybe you are feeling unwell. I hope you're not, but leaning back in the seat as if you're feeling quite weak, or lying down. I invite you to just to, move yourselves into another position and take yourselves into a posture where you'd be needing to be in if you were feeling sick, or if you were at that point of close to death, or if you had an injury that you couldn't sit, because it's important to actually think about these things now while we do have that ability, and work and develop the mind into another posture that may be a posture that we'll need to be using when we aren't feeling well, when we are at the point of, coming to the end of our life, when we're injured. We may have some disability come to us through accident or injury or illness. So just taking a different posture. And just briefly again, because we don't have a lot of time, just go through that similar process. So first, just getting comfortable, just getting a sense of that sense of spaciousness. Maybe if you normally have your eyes semi-open, close them fully and see what that does. This is your practice when you're doing these formal practices. You get advice from teachers, and it's all certainly they're coming from there as I am offering my experience. But in the end, you've got to work with your own body and mind and know what's best for it, and learn how to work with the different sort of situations and circumstances that you might find yourself in. So if you normally have your eyes semi-open or open, close your eyes and see what that does to your ability to observe the mind and the objects of your mind and body. Or if you open them wide, if you're feeling like maybe you'd be feeling sometimes you wouldn't want to close your eyes because everything could be too intense, and just do it like that. But just in this different posture with this slightly different change in circumstances, again, just bring that overall sense into the body and awareness of the state of the mind. Just quite a broad view, as though the mind's just gently touching the surface of the body, and there's some sort of like openness in the mind to just be there with whatever's there. And then again, just starting with that kindness practice or that compassion practice. May I be at ease, may I be free from suffering, whatever, just a short few words or a single word. Just bringing that sort of gentle tone of voice, so the quality of that feeling comes through in that mental voice. And just pace that repetition so it keeps the mind engaged but doesn't strain the mind. May I be at ease. And then you can then offer to all beings, may all beings be at ease. May they be free from suffering. And now drop the repetition. And just for a moment, whether you're lying or sitting in whatever posture you're in, just sit in that spaciousness, openness, but observing the body, observing the mind, whether the mind's thinking, analyzing, judging, whether it's calm, relaxed, whether the body is relaxed and at ease, or whether there's any pain or tensions. Just have an overall sense of that. And then instead of using the breath this time, and I know for myself when I was unwell, sometimes the breath can be very subtle, or sometimes it just feels uncomfortable. Just use the body, the contact of the body, as your object of mindfulness. So it might be the pressure of the body against, whether it's the floor you're leaning against, whatever contact there is, be aware of the contact of the body. And just be aware of it moment to moment, whether there's softness, hardness, whether any little tinges come up and the mind gets drawn to that. Just be aware of them and observe what that experience is like as well as you can. If the mind wanders off, don't tighten around that or judge it, but just be aware of that mind and what that experience of thinking is. Not the content of the thought, and not identifying with the content of the thought, but just aware of that actual experience. How do you recognize and know and that's a thought, or what is a thought? And just seeing it and then letting it go. Or, if it drops away, coming back to that main part of the body that you're observing. Just being present moment by moment. Now just coming back to your environment, your sort of external environment, and just very, very settled. So I guess I'd like to encourage you, when you do your meditation practice, to at times practice in a different posture. Think about and prepare for those times when you may find that it's beneficial to have an attitude towards the body when it's not at its most comfortable best, in the way that you prefer to sit, but that you can actually practice lying down, because it's more difficult to stay alert when you're lying down unless you train the mind to do so. And I've found that for me, sometimes I actually have to lie down because of my circumstances now. And so that's been quite beneficial in a way, even though it's probably, I wouldn't have chosen to have the situation happen, but in some ways I've learned a lot from that. So I encourage you to take that on board, or at least think about taking that in terms of your sitting practice. And then in terms of what Rinpoche's talked about in terms of in the section that Annie Zangmo just sort of read to us just a moment ago, around when you're doing all your activities, because in my my Mahasi practice, the practice isn't just the formal sitting, and no practice is about your formal sitting practice or your formal walking practice. It's about bringing that quality of attention and mindfulness to whatever you're doing, and training the mind so when the circumstances become difficult, the mind is more engaged and more inclined towards being present with whatever's arising, both in the body and the mind, particularly with mental states that are difficult, to not identify so much with what arises in the mind, rather than I'm angry or I'm upset or I'm fearful, but just with that open, spacious, kind-heartedness, compassion, thinking, well, there's fear there, there's fear in the mind, and feeling that fear rather than tightening around it, and allowing those emotions that we try to avoid, just to embrace them and invite them in if they need to be there, not sort of go searching for them. And the same with the joyful ones, as Rinpoche encourages to find joy in our lives and to embrace that without being attached to it at the same time, but know that there's joy and happiness in the mind, and recognize it, and be so grateful that we have those times as well. So I guess there's so much more I guess I could talk about, but I think hopefully that covers a bit of what I've wanted to say, and what I guess I've learned from my own practice and my my near-death experience, as well as working with people who are at that point of end stage of life. So anyway, thank you for listening to that. And I think Annie Zangmo's going to read a little more, and then we might have something else to say, but we'll see how time goes. Thanks, Annie.
Thank you so much. It's really great to just look at things differently. I'll be keen to see what people put in the chat box about that experience of practicing in a way that they're not used to practicing. So we will continue with Rinpoche's words, and then we'll come back to Tara again. And please put your Q&A, your questions in the chat box when we finish reading the text. So the last part of this section that we're doing tonight, apply awareness. As every moment of life also involves a small death, life itself provides us with many opportunities for glimpsing death. Most people these days are so distracted that few manage to make the most of these opportunities. Nevertheless, there is a way of relating to life's small deaths that will help you prepare for the death of your body at the end of this life. All you have to do is notice that there is a death in everything you do and in every moment, in a relationship, a marriage, a way of life, an almost empty cup of coffee. In many ways, this method sounds too simple to be truly effective. Yet this mere awareness is the key to understanding that death is part of every moment in life. Learn how to be aware without feeling that you always have to do something. Just notice. Ironically, the changes and deaths we experience in life bring us far more good than bad. Even so, we always make such a big drama about everything, especially the changes we label as bad. So learn to enjoy and appreciate life instead of brooding about the things that you have absolutely no control over. So Tara, I'll just give you the opportunity if you would like to say anything before people's questions in the chat box. Please put any questions or comments in the chat box. But yeah, is there anything you would like to add in finishing, Tara?
Well, I guess I'd like to reiterate, some of those words of Rinpoche's, or, and also what my Burmese Vipassana teachers say, is just reiterate that idea of just that moment to moment present awareness of just, as things arise and pass away, it's like those moments of something just dissolving, and that idea of, our bodily death, but these moments and moments just of coming and going in everything that we do, and just reiterating that idea of being as present as we can, even if we can't sit for long periods of time, or we physically find it difficult because of either, some difficulty we have, like a physical problem, or just because our minds are not so able to settle sort of still in that, but to just bring that attention and mindfulness to whatever we do, just in a very general way, not forcing the mind, but, with that gentle spaciousness, just to be present, to remember to be present. So when we waft off, thinking and judging or whatever, just bring the mind back to that. It's nothing wrong with judging. Sometimes we need to make judgments about things. So not even judging, but just to to be present as well as we can. And also, in terms of not feeling like we have to be the perfect meditator or the perfect yogi or the best Buddhist or whatever, but just be the person we are, as authentic as we can in each moment. I guess that's sort of what I'd finally say.
I think that's a pretty good summing up. Thank you so much. And I mean, I'm sure many of us have heard friends say, "Oh, I can't practice, I'm sick," or "I can't do, X because I'm not well enough, I'll wait until I'm better." And really, every moment is an opportunity for us to be able to practice inverted commas. And I just really like how you unpacked that idea that practice isn't necessarily, what we thought it is up until, different circumstances in our life. And for myself, meditating lying down, like I've really had to work with that because it's something I identify with going to sleep. So I don't know if other people would like to put anything in the chat about that or any comments. But yeah, practicing when you're ill, it's quite a different thing to be able to have that distance from the pain and from the emotions. So yeah, over to the lovely audience to see if there's any comments or any questions there. Maybe everyone's experienced at laying down and practicing. I love the meditation on too comfy a chair, eyes closed, very beautiful. A few people saying hello and thank you. There was a person up here. Actually, he had been a monk earlier in his life, and he was very, very ill. And he actually said, "I would rather be dead because I can't do my practice as I'm used to doing it." And I just found it really sad that there was absolutely no sort of leeway to find a different way to practice. It was, if I can't do it as I trained, then that's it. I'm finished. So I hope that we can all get something a bit more spacious than that. I'm just looking at the Shama's making a comment that Yoga Nidra is helpful meditation for lying down for people that haven't experienced that.
Yeah, that's a very nice relaxing type of practice for sure. It just depends on whether you want to work to relax, which is great and sometimes very necessary, or work with being present and developing that ability of the mind to identify and recognize different experiences that arise.
Yeah.
Yeah, certainly any whatever helps. It's all good.
I agree. Thank you so much, Tara. Great idea to try different postures. I'll follow up on that suggestion. That was from Dear Sering. I found it beneficial from Sonia to get used to the idea of working with what you've got, even if sick and dying. Even changing posture, is it better to keep a straight back?
Well, it just depends on what's happening. I mean, I guess if it's comfortable, if you're sitting with a straight back and it's feeling painful and uncomfortable, and all you're doing is sitting there gritting your teeth, then it's not that beneficial to do that. So really, in the end, it's about working with what you've got. So if it's more comfortable to lean back and be relaxed, and the mind can be at ease and actually investigate what's going on, then I'd sort of just recommend doing whatever feels right for you.
Yeah. From Leanne, I liked that distinction, Tara. Read the Yoga Nidra. Thank you. If there's no more questions or comments, here we go. Hold on. How do we differentiate between loving kindness, vipassana, and shamatha? Now that's a big one. That could be a day topic, but go for it.
Oh, thanks. Well, shamatha, loving kindness, is a shamatha practice, as well as compassion. So what the mind's doing. What are you doing is bringing a quality forward in the mind and developing that and leaving everything else that's going on aside. So shamatha is just a concentration. So you're just developing the mind to stay focused on an object, whether it's a repetition of a phrase or a mental state, or whether it's a visual object, or whether it's just the breath hold, watching the breath, but not investigating the qualities of the breath, just holding the mind onto the breath to bring, more and more concentration, which then can take you into jhanas. We won't go there, but, so you bring, very deep concentration to the mind. So metta, or loving kindness, is just one form of concentration or shamatha practice. Vipassana practice, mindfulness practice, is a wisdom practice. So what you're doing is to actually penetrate into the nature of the experience as it arises. So looking at things like the universal characteristics of anicca, anatta, and dukkha. So looking at each, and this takes, this is talking about more intensive long-term practice of seeing those universal characteristics within each experience and understanding the nature of reality. So developing more and more penetrative sort of investigation and knowledge of what's actually going on with moment-to-moment experience. So that's briefly a distinction.
Thank you. Good question, Kate. Now I'm just going to go back up into the questions. Thank yous. Thank you. This is encouraging respect the body in sickness. Great to be reminded of being flexible in our practice. Things will change, so best to be prepared. That could be a fantastic bumper sticker. Loving kindness can be married with yoga nidra. Nice. And then Sonia's sharing, when I had pneumonia, I couldn't breathe, which I'd also associated with breathing to that point. So to work with those strong feelings of fear of dying. So what if I die? I asked myself. Lots of objection. But then we have to face we will die. Could see had a wonderful life to that point. Family, friends, the precious Dharma, education. When I relaxed into gratitude, despite not being able to breathe, I eventually opened up and breathed clearly again.
Lovely.
Yeah, thank you. All right, how are we going for time? We are good. We've got like a couple of seconds to do our dedication and things. So if there are there any burning questions before we continue to finish the session? You've got another comment here. Breath equals meditation was my previous belief. This is Sonia. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for sharing that. Quite precious. Good to let that go. Okay, great. We can all take that on. All right. Well, thank you so much, Tara. It's really wonderful to have you with us. Really, really appreciate it. So if the material that was presented here today has raised any concerns for you, please speak to a trusted friend, your personal health professional, or Buddhist teacher or instructor, and we will dedicate together. This virtuous accumulation of merit we offer so that all obstacles dissolve, and that at the time of our death each of us may find ease in dying and swift rebirth in the pure land of great bliss, quickly gaining enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
Hold on 1 second, I've just got to finish something. Bit of trouble here with my own. I hope I'm spotlighted. Am I spotlighted?
Yep.
Yeah, very good. So next week, Jakob will be covering sleep practice. and Julie St Auburn and Sering, farewells and funerals. So mark that in your diary, and we will see you next week. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
That was wonderful. Thank you.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
Thank you, everyone. I'm just on gallery.
Thank you so much.
Checking everyone out. Wonderful.
Thank you.
Okay. Be well.
Be well. Love you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
We had someone on here completely new to Zoom, so well done. Operating Zoom for the first time. Okay, bye-bye. I'm going to turn the meeting off. Well, actually, I'm going to stop the recording.